Hello everyone, my name's Amy, and on behalf of the Academic Writing Education Center here at NTU, I'll welcome you to today's lesson, Writing Summaries. Without further ado, let's get started. In today's lesson, we'll be going over different parts of writing a summary, namely how to summarize as well as how to synthesize different information from different research. We will also introduce to you the different common pitfalls that you will encounter when writing a summary. And at last, some key takeaway from today's lesson. So let's get started. Part 1, how to summarize. So, before we get started, you need to understand why do we need a summary. When we are encountering an abundance of information from different research, it is essential for us to compile different parts and take away the most important bits that we wish to use in our research. If we don't do so by organizing our information correctly, what will happen is that often in time, we will lose track of this information, and at times mistaken these information perhaps as our own and accidentally fall into the trap of plagiarism. And essentially, when we are writing a summary, we're compiling these different information into useful segments for our research. And so, when we're writing a summary, what we need to be aware is number 1, brevity, namely keeping the information simple. Next is objectivity, ensuring that our attitude has not mingled with the original author's attitude. Number 3 is completeness, namely, is the information we have transcribed down as a summary the complete meaning of the original text? Next, we're going to the steps of summarizing. The first step when we are writing a summary is finding the keywords that are present in the research. And next, you need to ensure that the words being expressed in the original text are now being translated into your own words, hence you're not using them word by word. Next, having read the research and compiled the useful information into segments into your notes, you now need to compose the summary directly from the notes you've taken instead from the text you've just read. And at last, the last step of the summary, which is very important, is that you need to make sure that the summary truly expresses the original author's intentions instead of interpreting otherwise. So, when we are reading a text, we must first understand its structure. Often in time, our text will begin with a main idea. And using the rule of 3, under each main idea, we will have 3 major details. Then, under each of our major details, we will have minor details to support the claims that each major detail wishes to support the main ideas, and so on and so forth under each of our major details. And so some of the writing tips that we, AWEC, can provide to you is that you need to first identify the topic sentence of each main argument. Now, why is a topic sentence important? Essentially, the topic sentence is the main idea of each paragraph or even each chapter. This topic sentence then would outline the major detail that will be later presented in this particular paragraph. Also, if let's say you're summarizing a longer article or longer chapter, you need to make sure that you have included the introduction as well as the conclusion from this particular long segment of text into your summary to ensure that the overall idea or perspective is being presented holistically. Now, let's look at an example. Time management is a critical skill for all students to develop. Weekly and semester timetables are an excellent way to plan a study program. Students can use them to manage their most important study, work, and social commitments and to set themselves study goals. Block of time can then be set aside for study, reading, researching, and writing. The most urgent tasks can be addressed whilst work continues on preparing for lectures, tutorials, and assignments. If time has been allocated for specific purposes, it is easier to avoid unexpected demands like phone calls, visitors, and invitations. Assignments can be completed and submitted on time and to a satisfactory standard. Now, having read the original text, let's look at which one of the following options do you believe to be the best summary. Option 1. If students use their time well, they can finish and turn in their assignment on time to meet the general standards. Number 2. Effective time management allows students to utilize their time in order to successfully complete their study requirements. Number 3. Students should set aside time for studying, reading, researching, writing, and preparing for lectures, tutorials, and assignment. Now, which one of the above do you believe to be the best option? I'll give you 10 seconds. Let's go. The answer should be number 2. Well done. The reason why option number 2 is the best summary is because it leaves out the minor details such as mentioned in option 3, but presented the main argument, that is, effective time management, unlike option 1, which is simply too vague. Did you get the right answer? So, having just read the original text, perhaps a question raised in your mind. How long should a summary be? A summary, essentially, you need to first determine your focus. And in here, the AWEC is providing 2 different options for you to help you determine what your focus is. Number 1, are you now taking notes so that later you can review the notes again when you're writing or researching in the future? Number 2, are you going to include the summary as part of your writing to support your arguments? Having determined your focus, it will help you to better organize your thought, your logic, your structure, as well as the type of information you wish to take down in your notes in order to help you compose a better summary. Now, when you're writing a summary as an annotated bibliography, what kind of things can you be aware of? The AWEC is now popping to you different questions that can help you produce an appropriate and scholarly summary. The first question perhaps you'll ask yourself is, what is the topic of the source? Then, what action did the author perform within the study and why? Perhaps different experiments, perhaps different train of thoughts, perhaps different steps or procedures. What were the method of the author? So exactly what did they use, or what did they do? Then, what was the theoretical basis for the study? Namely, what theory, which school of thoughts, what exactly were the philosophy that were implemented into the study? What were the conclusion of the study? So what are the results? What are the application? What are the future prospects? Now, we're going to be looking at how to summarize one source over multiple sentences. Now, the first thing you need to be aware of is that citing just once in a summary perhaps is not clear to the reader that you're only citing one source instead of multiple sources. So here we are offering you 3 different options for you to cite in a summary. Number 1, using narrative and parenthetical citations. Number 2, using periodic citation and reminder cues. And number 3, using citation narratively in each sentences. Now, these titles may be confusing, so let's look at different examples for us to show you exactly how these different citations are being used. Number 1, using narrative and parenthetical citations. Now, let's spend about 10 seconds to quickly glance through the text. The meaning of the text is not as important as the citation that we're going to look at right now. It is quite evident in the purple highlighted words that Song and Petrucci is the main author of this research, and they conducted the research in 2015. What we can observe from this particular summary is that Song and Petrucci the name of the author as well as the publication year can be placed at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence as well, but in a bracket. Now, regardless of where you have placed the citation, we can see that this citation is consistent throughout the text. It is clear in determining and giving credit to where it's due who the authors are and who conducted the research. And so by using the author's name, namely as citation, it is clear on where about the source of the information come from to avoid the trap of plagiarism. Next, we're looking at using periodic citation and reminder cues. Again, let's spend about 10 seconds to glance over the text. As you can see from the text, Smith et al., namely Smith and his team, have conducted a research in 2017. Instead of the previous citation method, where the name of the author is repeated throughout the original text, we can see that in this particular segment, this text uses pronouns as well as synonyms to replace Smith and all. We can see the authors, they show, the review. These are different methods that has reminded the reader who the researchers are, as well as the research they have conducted. By providing this, we are allowing the reader to follow the logic of the text more continuously using different pronouns as well as synonyms, at the same time preserving a fluent grammatical structure. Let's look at the third options when citing in a summary, namely using citation narratively in each sentence. Again, spend about 10 seconds to glance over the text. We can see that Fossati, in 2017, conducted a research. Now, in this particular segment, we can see that Fossati is being repeated over and over again in the text, while using a pronoun he. In this particular text, what we can see is that again, we're giving credit where it's due. Who the author is, where did the information come from, as well as using the Fossati author's name to ensure that our reader can follow the logic of the text and knowing who the authors are. But because we're repeating the author's name over and over again, it will result in repetition, which means that this paragraph would be seemingly a little choppy. Unlike the previous citation when we use different pronouns, different synonyms, the grammatical structure in this particular segment, using citation narratively in each sentence, will be seen a little choppy, so it will seem a bit more segmented instead of understanding the text flow continuously. Now that we're done with summarizing, let's go into how to synthesize different texts. Now, one must be aware, your thinking grows and changes as you read, which means the more you read, the more you change because your knowledge bank has increased. So first, let's look at a summary grid. When we have all different kinds of information at hand, namely bibliographies, periodicals, different type of text and different form of text, a lot of times perhaps different authors would hold the same opinion. And so in order to ensure all these different authors are giving credit where it is due, I need to make sure that these authors are being put into my notes. And so let's look at the screen. We can see that the topic is personal protective equipment used by healthcare personnel. And so different segments of information or different facts I've gathered from different research are now organized onto this grid. This grid is divided into 4 sections. Namely, individual factors that affect compliance, and organizational factors that affect compliance. Now, we can see that under each segment, individual factor or organizational factor, it all listed key words or key main points from different research. But then you ask me, exactly where did it say that it is from different research? We can see on the right-hand side. Under individual factor, there's also citation number in the reference list, and then there's a number 15. Also, there's a key information that was derived from reference list 15. On the organizational factor, we can see that citation number 4, 6, 8, 16 was mentioned, and another key point was included, like increased workload decreases PPE compliance. And so, by organizing the abundance of information we have at our hand from our reference list, we'll be able to give credit where it's due, namely, which of the authors that are included in our research have said the same thing, but without overcrowding our summary. And so exactly, how would one cite all these different information within such a short summary? Does that mean our entire segment of text will be crowded with different references? Not entirely so. Let's look at the following example to better demonstrate to you how we can synthesize different information from different sources in a short and concise summary. So, when we're synthesizing sources, we must use the following steps. Number 1, you will read all different types of relevant material to your topic. Next, you will make brief notes about these information using the key points or keyword that are presented in the research. Then you will identify the common idea that all these different authors share. Having done so, you'll group these ideas together to support your main arguments. And at last, you will cite the information or cite the authors that you have used in your research. So, let's look at an example. We can see in this particular text, individual factor is being mentioned. And using the example of Sieber and Alt, you can see the small number 15. Under the text, in the footnote, you will include where the reference comes from. Having done so, we can also look at the organizational factor that was mentioned in the summary grid. We can see that under organizational factors, it listed several key words. And all these keywords are mentioned by the authors of reference lists 4, 6, 8, 16, and 17. And all these references can be found at the end of the research using the reference list. By doing so, we're giving the author where credit is due and ensuring that for our reader who wish to explore further reading, they can use our well-composed reference list to find these different authors. So having gone through how to summarize as well as how to synthesize, let's discuss the common pitfall one can face when composing a summary. So what are some of the common mistakes when we're composing a summary? Number 1, we're misunderstanding key concepts or ideas, which then get into the way of helping us to understand the text. And number 2, due to shortage of time and the abundance of material, often in time as a researcher, you simply skip through segments of information or only reads part of it, which means that your understanding is not comprehensive nor holistic, which could misunderstood the original intention of the author. Perhaps sometimes when we're composing a summary, we simply use the abstract or the conclusion of a research as our summary, and then we paraphrase it, thinking that it could be an eligible summary. But often in time, that is not the case. Perhaps sometimes you wish to save time, and so you pick the whole sentence from the source text and string them together, meaning using different connectors, transition signals and combine them together to use as a summary. That is not correct as well. Or we could be quoting the entire sentence. Now that would fall under citation instead of summary. When we are composing summaries, perhaps you added a new unrelated idea to the summary. That would actually be a misinterpretation of the author's original viewpoint, meaning that you're now distorting their original intention, which is not a correct way to compose your summary. After having completed your summary, perhaps you failed to proofread your summary, which means that the clarity and the completeness of summary will be compromised. So here are some of the final tips that we're going to give you in terms of today's lesson. Summaries are much shorter than the original text. So a general rule of thumb to writing a summary is that it should be about 10 to 15% of the length of the original text, or sometimes even shorter than this. And when you're writing a summary, you definitely need to remember to number one, read the source carefully to ensure you're not misinterpreting or misunderstanding any information. Number two, you have identified successfully the attitude of the author on the particular subject matter. And often in time, when we are identifying different attitudes, the following are some of the grammatical clues that can help you to ensure that you are demonstrating them correctly. Namely, the strength of a claim. So, perhaps you're stating a sentence beginning with, it is so-and-so that, or there is so-and-so that. The strength of a claim can be stronger or weaker depending on the different word that you use. Hypothetically speaking, if you're using the word highly unlikely, it definitely means that this particular claim is not possible. Yet, if you're using the word a definite possibility, then obviously the strength of the claim is definitely stronger. A lot of time, we will also be using modal verbs in our claims. And so when we're using a modal verb in our summary with words like would, could, should, might, it also demonstrates different level of doubt or certainty to the level of claims you're using in your summary. So when we are using will, the certainty would definitely be higher. When you're using the word like might, then perhaps the attitude is quite tentative in terms of its certainty. Now let's look at the differences between should have, could have, and might have. When you're using the word like should have, such as example, the image should have been more informative if they were in color, then perhaps you're demonstrating the attitude of criticism. If you're using could have, such as the example, the resolution of the gel material could have changed if substantial heating had occurred, then perhaps you're giving out a suggestion. And the third example, the damage assessment might have been more accurate if it had been done immediately after the earthquake. In this case, because you're using the word might have been, you are suggesting something, but the strength of the suggestion will be quite weak. Next, let's look at tentative verbs. Tentative verbs are suggestion words. With these different tentative verbs, it indicates that the writer has an inclination to believe in something, but yet he still wishes to be presented as hesitant to show that uncertainty. Let's look at example. The data appears to support the hypothesis, but further sampling would need to be undertaken to increase the reliability of the final result. We can see that in this particular example, although the data seems to or appears to support the original intention of the author, but yet the author wished to remain cautious and hence suggests that further sampling would need to be taken. Now that we're done with today's lesson, let's go over the key takeaway. So exactly what is a summary? A summary consists of a brief description of that one single main idea that is being presented in the research, as well as other pieces of text that you wish to remain behind for further use. And today we'll look at two different methods to better organize our abundance of information. Number one is summary. Summary is essentially an overview of the important general information, and you will be organizing it in your own words and sentence structures. While when we synthesize different information, new interpretation of the summarized or paraphrased details. Now, these newly summarized and paraphrased details, we must remember to ensure that these are presented in our own words and our own sentence structure as well. I hope today's lesson has been valuable to you in helping you understand what a summary is and how to effectively summarize the abundance of information you have on hand to better help your research and become a better researcher. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.